All right.
Okay.
Sid Macken, I'm Floyd Holcomb, and I want to thank you for coming to be interviewed today at the Northwest Historical Dive Association
Glad
booth.
to be here.
And this is all about you. We're trying to figure out Sid Macken and your background and when you started diving, and why don't you start off with that? Where did it all begin?
For me,
Yes,
it began in Perrydale, Oregon.
Perrydale. Now that's down here off the coast. Let's see,
No.
Forest Grove, Carlton, right down here.
Right down south of McMinnville.
Right there. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
right down south of McMinnville. I got interested in diving through television programs. Sea Hunt's the obvious one,
Sure.
everybody talks
Yeah.
about, but there was also Kingdom of the Sea, Dangerous My Business, and I think there was like one or two other shows that had diving involved in it, and then books. I was about 10 years old when I started getting the bug.
So you're in a farm thinking about deep sea diving.
Yeah.
I mean, most people from farms think about tractors and other different things, but you're thinking about deep sea diving in Perrydale.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
I didn't have really anybody else around. I had a cousin that we had face masks and flippers and stuff. We'd go out to farm ponds or to the local streams.
Farm ponds, really?
Yeah. And some of the local streams and splash around and look at stuff. But my interest in it just kept growing. And I don't know why in particular. There was nothing in my family background that I knew of at the time.
Okay.
I just...
And you're what? How old are you now at that time?
10.
10.
About 10.
So when did you take your first formal education in diving?
At the age of 13. My mom met a guy who was a college student at Linfield College in McMinnville. And he taught scuba classes at the McMinnville swim pool.
Wow.
And I begged and wheedled and, convinced my folks that was something they should let me do. And they did. And so Larry Blum, this 20-something college kid, was putting on actually pretty decent classes at the time. And that's where I got my first formal dive training.
And was that YMCA, Patty? Was there an agency at that time?
No,
there wasn't.
No, this was. I was 13, so this is 1960.
Oh, okay.
1960, when NWDHA was just forming.
Sure.
YMCA had formed, but there was no YMCA where I lived.
Right.
Los Angeles County had instruction, but that was Los Angeles County in California. So there was no certified instruction at that time.
What was his name?
Larry Blum.
Larry Blum. We need to find Larry Blum.
Yeah. Well, Larry was, like I said, he was a college student, but he had taken classes from Tom Ammerman in Portland.
Okay.
And he had taken his classes, he learned to dive in 1958.
Wow.
In
Former
fact,
Navy diver or something?
No. He later ended up in the Army, but at that time, I'm pretty sure he was just straight out of high school into college. He might have had some service time, I don't know, before this, but he learned to dive from Tom Ammerman, who was the guy that opened the first dive shop in Portland. In fact, I have the Regulator, the 1958 DA Aquamaster that Larry Blum bought from Tom Ammerman.
Jeez, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So from about age 13 now, you're giving up, graduating from high school, you've got dive training. Where did you go from there?
From there, I went to Oregon State University for 1 year because I thought I'd going to be a marine biologist.
Okay, there you go.
There we go. I ended up in September of 1966 enlisted in the Army.
Now you weren't drafted, you enlisted.
I enlisted, yeah.
Okay.
But the winter before, the Christmas vacation of my senior year in high school, 3 of us loaded up in a truck and drove up to the San Juan Islands.
Wow.
3 high school kids. Our folks said, sure, go ahead.
Take off.
You got 2 weeks, be back.
Be back.
So we drove up, we went to Orcas Island, to a little motel on West Beach, at West Beach in Orcas, and we were diving out of there. And we had, amongst the three of us, had formed a scuba club.
What was the name of it?
The Orcas.
The Orcas?
We even had an embroidered patch.
Really?
Yeah.
You got any of that around anymore?
No, unfortunately. Oh, yeah. But we were wearing our club jackets up there. And this guy that was staying at the motel approached us and said, "Are you guys from around here?" And we got to talking, and it was a gentleman named Spence Campbell.
We had Spence here yesterday.
Yeah.
And Spence was your mentor.
And Spence was, yeah.
Many mentors.
Yeah. But anyway, Spence, we went diving with him.
What year was this?
This would have been winter of '65.
Okay.
So anyway, we got to go diving off his boat. They had a hooker rig that they let us try. It's the first time I'd ever dived on a hose. But he knew we'd had classes, but we weren't certified. But he was a NWDHA instructor, and he said, "Well, you guys get the chance, come up to Seattle." He lived in Bellevue, and he said, "Come up and I'll run you through the course and get you an actual certification card." So in December of '66, I was stationed at Fort Lewis.
Wow.
And I had some time off at Christmas. So I drove home, got my gear, drove back to Bellevue and spent a weekend with Spence. And he ran me through all the book work, all the paperwork for the dive course. And then we went out to Edmonds Oil Pier and did checkout dives.
And tell me about the equipment that you're diving on at that time.
Well, let's see. My first, in 1960, we were diving double hose, U.S. divers, regulators, surplus cylinders, CO2
cylinders.
Yeah, CO2. Wow. I've got one of those sitting over in the booth over here. We were picking up, actually all of our equipment was basically used. I didn't get my first new anything until I was 16, I think it was, when I bought a white stag wetsuit. But we'd pick up used gear, Healthways, little Scuba Star regulators, real early single hose regulators. Some of our gear we found on the bottom of Hood Canal up at a place called Seal Rock State Park.
Okay. You found on the bottom.
Yeah, somebody else's boat had tipped over, and my little brother and I were up there diving, and swimming along. We just found a pile of gear, so we picked up everything we could carry and swam it to the beach.
What kind of equipment was it when you went through the class with Spence?
With Spence, oh gosh, single hose regulator, probably Healthways, because that's what I dove most. Once I got into single hose regulators, it was mostly Healthways stuff. No BCs, mast, fins, snorkel, wetsuit, weight belt, tank and regulator.
Did you make your own wetsuit back then, or were they all kind of made? Healthways made them?
All the wetsuits I had were bought. Most of the early ones, like I said, I bought used stuff.
Okay.
But the old skin to both sides, no reinforced seams, just glued seams.
Yeah. Did you finished in the Army with Spence, and then you went into the Army Special Forces? What years were those?
Well, see, I did. Like I said, I enlisted in September of '66. I went from Fort Lewis to Fort Benning, Georgia.
Okay.
And went through Officer Candidate School. And while I was there, I wanted to do something more than just the regular infantry, or I wanted to get into something a little bit more interesting. So I volunteered for Special Forces. And when I graduated from OCS, they sent me to jump school and then to 10th Special Forces in Germany. And I was with 10th until I got off active duty. And tried as I might while I was on active duty to get to a dive school, it never happened in the military.
Sure.
But what did happen while I was in the military was reading the issue of Skin Diver magazine, and they announced a new dive program that had opened up at Santa Barbara City College in Santa Barbara, California.
Oh, wow.
And I looked at that and read the description of the course, and I wrote to the school and got more information on it. And coming up in August of 1969, I was eligible for what they called an early out, 30 days early out.
Okay.
And so I applied for it and got it, and applied to the school and got accepted to the school. So I went from, at that time, Fort Devens, Massachusetts. I loaded up a truck and trailer and drove to Santa Barbara, California to go to dive school.
And who was the instructor there at Santa Barbara at that time? I mean, it must have been somebody well known today, I'm sure.
Within certain circles, yeah. The program director was a guy named Ramsey Parks.
Okay.
And then the main instructors were Jim Parker and Bob Christensen.
Sure.
And then we had besides the diving, since it was a 2-year city college, we had the basic college courses, math, economics. Only for our program it was like marine law and economics, and marine biology, that sort of thing. And most of those instructors, I couldn't remember their names, but.
And this was 1970.
69 through 71.
71.
Yeah. Okay. And then we also, besides the academic classes and the diving classes, we had machine shop, welding,
sure.
Drafting, those sorts of classes to go along with it.
What did you do after that? You graduated from Santa Barbara?
And wanted badly to get into the diving fields in some way. Yeah. But had already made up my mind that I did not particularly care about going to Louisiana and working in the oil fields. Originally, my original intent when I went to Santa Barbara, they had 2 programs. They had the marine diving program, and they had one called marine instrumentation.
Oh.
And marine instrumentation was oriented more towards scientific diving.
Okay.
Yeah, you would be the technician that helped the marine biologists conduct their
experiments and their research.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that,
was NOAA involved in that time, or was NOAA involved in that time, or I guess it would have been Navy Observatory at that time, right?
There were NOAA and those people were around, but mostly it would have been like universities, research centers, like the Hatfield Marine Science Center in Newport.
Yeah. Okay.
Those sorts of places, and that intrigued me. But I got into the course, and there were only 2 of us enrolled as underwater instrumentation. Or two students.
And who was the other one? You remember his name?
No, I don't remember his name.
Yeah.
But partway through the first year, partway through the first semester, the college decided that there's only 2 students in that program, and they dropped it.
Wow.
The other kid left, and I said, well, I'm here, and I'm going to finish the dive program. So I switched over to the marine diving technology part of the program. And it was oriented towards the oil field industry.
Which were paying the money.
Yeah,
Sure.
they were the ones who were supporting the program. Yeah. It was a great dive training program. But once I graduated, I still wanted to try to break into more of the technical side of it. So I came up, and I wanted to work in the Northwest. So I came home, started looking around for work, and found out really quickly that to apply for a technician job at a research center, I was competing against guys with PhDs.
PhDs?
Yeah. And I had an associate's degree, right? So I shifted focus. I ended up, basically working as a machinist for years and years and years, but I always kept involved in diving, underwater photography. In fact, for several years, I ran a business, camera repair business, that was specifically oriented towards underwater cameras.
And you have quite a collection of these underwater cameras. I mean, you've gone back to earlier days of collected some stuff. I attended a talk that you had at the Columbia River Maritime Museum at one time, and you talked about the changes of that technology. And then still very involved in that. Are you
I am.
Writing papers and?
Yeah, I'm with the Historical Diving Society.
Yes. You're the president of the Historical Diving Society.
I keep that part quiet.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty honorable achievement.
Anyway,
Sid. I mean, if you think about the faces on the Historical Dive Society's, annual, or it comes out 6 times a year, right?
Four
times a year. I mean, these are the gods of diving. So I mean,
I get to rub elbows with some interesting people.
Yeah, you sure do.
But I do, for our publication, like I said, it comes out 4 times a year, and I write a column in there on the history of underwater photography.
Yeah, no, it's good writings. I've read a lot of them.